All right, we're live. Hey, what do you know? I know what I'm doing, kind of. Hi, Sujan.
Hey, Ken, where am I?
You're in you got a nice place with a nice couch and fireplace and I'm moving to your house. That's where I
Yeah, I
want to
wish
go.
this was my place. I'd love to be. This would love
I'm
to
at
be
the
my
Chariot
place.
office. So go figure. Welcome, everybody, to Tech Chat Tuesday, number 47, I believe, based on the fact that I'm showing the Tech Chat Tuesday, number 46. And that's for Tuesday, March 15th, the Ides of March, 2022. I'm Ken Rimple.
I'm Sujan Kapadia, and we have all the Ides that I care for these days.
Yeah, we don't need any more Ides, you know?
No.
If you are interested in subscribing, if you stumbled onto this thing on YouTube through a Twitter post or whatever, if you head over to Chariot Solutions and you go to the resources podcasts tab, you'll see our page for this. You'll see an RSS feed. If we hit that page, you can go to iTunes or RSS and subscribe. You can go to the iTunes store. You can go to all sorts of different podcast places, including Spotify, and go ahead and subscribe from there. We're going to talk about dev news today. Mostly, we're going to talk a little bit more in depth about the Apple event that just came out. There's a number of things that came out of that event that we want to kind of kick around a little bit. So we'll spend a little time marinating in that towards the middle of the show. If you want to see our content that we put a ton of content up there. First of all, there's the podcast. There is our blog, which has a ton of stuff. I'm going to be bringing up one of my articles a little bit in the blog section of our talk today. Lots and lots of different tech here. Front end, back end, you name it. It's all in here somewhere. Some mobile, if you search around a little bit. We also, have a ton of content on YouTube. So if you go to youtube.com/Chariot Solutions, you will see all of our videos. We're not new to this. We've been doing this for years. So we've broken it up into some playlists to help you out. If you are interested in talking and seeing Philly emerging technologies for the enterprise, you can watch the entire event from last year by hitting our Philly ETE 2021 list. You can look, since it's Women's Month, spotlight our amazing women speakers. We have 71 articles, I believe, there. We have a super playlist of all the ETEs going back forever and a lot more. Also, Tech Chat Tuesdays, if you're curious in going backwards and looking at the things we talked about before.
My daughter thinks that you and I are YouTube celebrities.
She's the only one. Your daughter's my favorite now. Send her a t-shirt. Like she doesn't have 20 Chariot t-shirts to choose from. Right. Also want to put in a quick plug. We are hiring. We're looking for front-end and back-end developers. We'll talk about that a little bit more towards the end of the show. But the main thing I want to talk about at the moment is Philly Emerging Technologies for the Enterprise 2022, coming up on April 19th and 20th. It's a virtual event, and tickets are on sale now. First things first, the early bird has been extended until March 31st. Right now, it's still $150, I believe. And if you register before the early bird is up, you will save, I think it's going to be $225 after that. So still a low-cost event, but hey, you know what? Tickets are going now, and there's some really good speakers coming up in this. The other thing I want to mention is the schedule is online. We did our scheduling about, I think, a week and a half ago, and now we have the full run of the show. So if you want to see who's speaking when, you can see our opening and closing keynoters, which we'll get to in a second, and a ton of other talks, all with times. The way we're doing it, we're doing 3 talks at a time, not really tracks, but just basically 3 separate talks. We try to split them up so that they don't overlap in terms of technology types. So you won't see 2 web talks at the same time or 2, server programming talks, for example. We try to spread it out nicely. And we've got some amazing speakers. I wanted to bring up briefly that we've got Cory Doctorow as our closing keynote. He's a huge get for us. Very, very big science fiction author, activist, and journalist. He's been on This Week in Tech a lot and a number of other places as well. And he's Electronic Frontier Foundation member. His talk is called Seizing the Means of Computation, a Big Tech Disassembly Manual. So, we bring people in with different opinions all the time. This one is talking about how we can try to find a way to have more inclusiveness in terms of some of the things that people are able to do. So, for example, the concerns about copyright, patent, trade secret, and non-compete and other IP rights that are causing us to be kind of forced down a path of using software in a certain way. So that's his talk. Should definitely be interesting. And our opening keynote is really interesting as well. Elizabeth Adams, who's the Global Chief AI Culture and Ethics Officer for Women in AI, talking about responsible artificial intelligence, the case for inclusive tech. And this has been an issue where we found, AI systems have been not properly identifying people of color, for example. So, a lot of things that are brought up from this. So she is going to discuss things like discrimination, fairness, digital injustice, and bias. So she opens the show. And so hopefully that'll be really useful.
I'm really looking forward to that.
Yeah, it's going to be good.
I didn't know what this. I didn't know where you were going this initially. I admittedly had not looked at this keynote, and I was gonna say that the way the world's going right now, I think I'd even deal with irresponsible AI. Maybe are better than humans, but not when it comes to this stuff.
Not when it comes to this stuff. Yeah, right. Exactly. Some humans I wonder about. Yeah. Also, I'm going to just bring up a talk that I just recently got the abstract for Spring Framework 6. I know a lot of people in our world have been Java developers and or are Spring developers in the back end. Spring Framework 6, it's interesting. It's now is going to require, when we get to 6, Java 17 and above and Jakarta EE 9 and above, because of the way you have to enable certain technologies in the future. It's also going to support Growl VM. So you can build like a native application in Spring booting up really fast. So Josh Long is going to
require Java 17.
Yeah, it's going to be it's probably a good thing overall.
Yeah.
So it kind of brings it into the modern world in terms of fast container starts and things like that. So this should be really interesting. Cool. All right, let's get into some news items then. So first things first, we have. Yeah, go ahead.
No, I was going to go over a talk pick, but that's fine.
If you want to, we have time.
All right. So kind of riffing on that, another framework. So there's another talk at ET by the core maintainers, committers, co-founders of Dapper, which is a microservice application framework that basically allows you to stand up, build cloud native applications. It gives you a lot of the services you're looking for around, communication between microservices, storage, authentication, etc. Kind of what are the best practices around that, and it gives you like all batteries included approach to stand up microservices on the cloud, which is a pretty complicated thing these days with all the different components and deployment patterns and tools that are available. Mark Fussell and Yaron, I don't know how to say his name, Yaron Schneider are both co-founders, core maintainers of this. They're both from Microsoft, so they work on Azure, so they have a lot of cloud experience. They know and probably seen a lot of different problems and patterns and came up with Dapper based off of that. So I think this is something definitely worth listening to kind of get particularly their insight on problems they've seen and how this framework addresses those problems, and maybe worth taking a spin on this too.
Fantastic. All right, so that's ETE 2022. Register now. It's definitely worth your time. Okay, one news item. Just got this off the BBC. Chip giant ARM is set to axe 15% of its staff after the deal with NVIDIA fails. So it turns out that they were going to be merged into NVIDIA. And unfortunately, it looks like there was so much regulative hurdles to get over to do that NVIDIA is turning it down. And so SoftBank, who I guess currently owns them, is going to list the company. It's going to list them actually on the NASDAQ, which is interesting because they're a UK company. And that's, I guess, kind of a loss for the UK, but good for the US. So look for that in the future. And the layoffs seem to be coming from both the US and the UK. So interesting. I mean, ARM's still out there. The tech is still out there, but that attempt to kind of merge it into a larger company failed. So we'll have to see where that goes. I know a lot of systems are built based on the ARM specifications, and I assume it'll have a good life once it's been listed and has shareholders and such. We'll have to see where that heads.
I guess, is this global staff? Is it staff across the board? Is it a specific unit?
So I'm not sure which units or anything. I didn't see that in the article, but they did say the UK and the US specifically.
Okay. I'm hoping. I know US has plans. It's going to take years to bear fruit, but of building up their own chip factories and being able to bring some of that back.
Right.
Hopefully, these folks that are getting axed can find opportunities at those other places that we're hoping to build up here.
Yeah, and maybe when they list them on the NASDAQ, maybe that's one of their goals. We'll have to see what their actual corporate plans are for now that they're not joining up with NVIDIA. So we'll see. All right. This is one you pulled out that I was like, wow. Google's new tech can read your body language without cameras on Wired.
Yeah, it's just scary. Scary, and it's not as invasive as a camera or video camera. So it's using radar. So you recall a couple years ago, I forget which variant of the Pixel, they introduced a radar sensor in the phone where you could do gestures, like, tap or go, like, it's not on the screen, but in the air, and the radar would sense it. So this unit, which basically has this radar and a projector, camera, etc. Actually, I don't think this has a camera, but it can basically detect movement, gestures, and I guess your arms and stuff. I don't know how well it is at detecting facial things. Like, I think one of the points is that it's not tracking people's identities. It's just looking at movement. The idea being that they want technology to be more interactive and aware of folks so that it feels more natural. And I'm sure anytime I think of these kind of things, I really think about accessibility and think about folks that can't type, can't do certain things, that, technology like this could be a game changer for folks that have different types of impediments that are able to now basically interact with that technology. So hopefully this is used for good purposes and not nefarious purposes. And they keep building on it. It's the same department, I want to say, at Google that does their advanced technology and products department. They do wearables. They've done stuff like you mentioned, a touch sensitive denim jacket. So this radar is not just they want technology to be able to, the scary part is like to understand our needs and potentially our emotions and like react to us. It's like, okay, another set of data points to collect and know what we're thinking and doing. But hey, I mean, I think there's good things here, especially like vehicles that want to continue going touchless and touchscreen and not have steering wheels and stuff. The U.S. just approved of autonomous driver technology that, that does not have to have a steering wheel. So they're approving that approach of building vehicles that don't have any touch controls, any steering wheels or anything like that. So maybe something like this could be used where you're using gestures to drive like your car.
It's gonna stop. Yeah.
Like, take me there, and it just takes you there.
Yeah. See, you kid have a field day like driving us nuts. Oh, Dad, look, Yeah.
So they're using the same sensor in this research that they were prototyping and researching with the Pixel 4, the Soli SOLI sensor. Interested in looking into that more.
Interesting. Cool. All right. Here's one that's a little yikes. So we all know, we know that lithium-ion batteries, it's not a good idea to, let's say, hit them with a hammer, puncture them. But let's say don't ship a whole bunch of parts labeled as computer waste, I believe it was, computer parts into a shipping container with a bunch of lithium-ion batteries. One of the weird things about lithium-ion, and if you search for, I'm going to mention this site. It's a Reddit site called Spicy Pillows, and that sounds a little scary, but what it is, it's all the lithium-ion batteries people have that balloon up with the gas when they start failing. And there's all these crazy pictures, like it'll be a phone, but the glass is like popped way off in a giant pillow of a lithium-ion battery gas, which I believe is hydrogen gas in that case, is sitting there ready to explode. And if they hit the air, I mean, it basically, lithium combusts in the air on immediately. So this is basically a container shipping container loaded with a whole bunch of discarded lithium batteries back in last summer, completely like burned apart on its way to a ship. So this is the Coast Guard has come out and said, please keep in mind when you're shipping things that if you could ship, lithium, you got to be very careful of how you ship lithium-ion batteries and battery waste because it's dangerous. Luckily it was on its way to the port of Virginia. It was going to go onto a ship to China, a third-party chartered ship to China. If it would have gotten on that and burned up, it could have burned the whole thing down. And also there was I don't know if you remember recently, there was a big cargo ship called the Felicity Ace. It was a huge car carrier that had a lot of electric vehicles as well as Bentleys and other things. And it caught fire and sunk. And they said the electrical batteries made it tough to fight them. So one of the downsides of electrification, I think the upsides are really, really, really important. But hopefully battery technology continues to improve and we find ways to find battery tech that doesn't explode on us.
Hopefully we can find a way to eject this stuff cost effectively into space at some point.
There you go. Plus the fireworks will be immense and cool. All right. So then that's our quick news items. I have a couple blog articles. One of them here, Sujan, you found this one, How I Discovered Thousands of Open Databases in AWS by Avi Lumelski.
Ton of unprotected databases that you can reach publicly that have easy to guess or default username passwords. And some of those cases, there could be honeypots, meaning, they're purposely put out there for folks to get into because they want to get your information or access to your stuff, and you may be using them for something, so they want to collect data. In other cases, folks are just not configuring these properly, right? They're not putting them behind security VPCs and security groups. They're not, whitelisting who can access it. They're not putting good username password policies in place, so they're completely unprotected. And apparently, based off of what this person was doing and scanning and searching for it, it's more prevalent than you would think, which is really scary. And the discussion on Hacker News on this article interesting because a lot of folks seem to be rightfully concerned now is that since everyone's getting on the cloud and not many folks have a background in security or setting these things up, like it's lowered the bar for engineers that are deploying and configuring things and that should be learning more about how to do it the right way before going ahead and doing it.
Yeah.
So you read this and you're just like, oh my God, this is scary. And not only is it scary that it's happening, it's also very easy with all the tooling available and what they did in terms of scanning here, right? And going through is getting access to these things.
Yeah, MassScan was a scanner he used. He picked the number of CIDR blocks and just went at it.
Yep.
So, and then he found he had over 337,000 IP port combinations in almost no time, and many of them got in and like opened the port, I guess. That's insanity. So, I mean, first of all, to even think twice, just a little tip for everybody here. Think twice before letting your database be open on the internet to connect to from a tool. Don't do that because you're leaving a port to a database open. And if they hack in, they get your data no matter what. So at bare minimum, that should be behind the firewall and hopefully on another service that is then only accessible from the service that needs it. Exactly. I would push everyone to the Amazon's principles of least privilege. And even if it's not Amazon, follow those principles. Absolutely. Only get to what you absolutely need to get to. In fact, that's another, I know I'm tangenting here, but that's a really good blog post from Keith Gregory this last month, actually in January, managing internet access for AWS workloads going out. Don't just let, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, no, go ahead.
I was going to say, don't just let it go everywhere, because if someone compromises that service, then it can make a call to something else and that can be used to get in. You're just creating a nightmare. So
it's really never a case where you should be exposing a database publicly like that. It should only be behind the right level of IAM policies and security, and it should only be accessible by whatever service or, that actually needs to talk to it.
Wow, this is insane. Like, just
yeah. So he like logged the data out, put it into CSV, analyzed it with pandas. And he did a lot of research and put a thing together to basically provide his findings.
And look at him; he's good. He's good for doing this. Yeah. However, I don't know how much he shares that like could be used to compromise them further. Mm-hmm. But hey, look, he's reported the companies he found under until a certain limit because he basically had too many to report information of. And then of course he was talking to AWS. Of course, they're saying, hey, it's true. It's the shared responsibility model of AWS is we'll manage the plumbing. We'll make sure the physical servers are safe. You're setting up all your privileges. You are responsible for the privileges.
Yep.
And that's absolutely true.
Yeah.
So just great advice. And I'm sadly not surprised that people take shortcuts and don't think about this stuff. And that's how people lose money and get their stuff stolen. So it's a shame.
Yeah.
All right. Here's another blog article from Adrian Gonzalez Carpintero. Run pandas as fast as Spark. So first of all, give our viewers an overview of Pandas and Spark at a very quick thumbnail.
Sure. So Spark is basically a distributed computing platform. You basically can have a cluster of machines, and you can process large data sets across that cluster. So you can parallelize your work. You can split your data across a set of computers and say, run these operations against each of these data sets. And then, and I'm oversimplifying a lot of this, right? And then combine the results at the end to write out to a data warehouse or write out to a set of files or to aggregate something together. So it gives you an ability to write a program to process data and then say, now take my recipe that processes the data and split it apart and send that recipe to all the nodes that are in that cluster. And each of those nodes will have data that recipe is going to run against on that node, and then combine all the results at the end. So that's Spark. Pandas.
Science, basically.
Oh, go ahead.
So commonly used for data science type processing.
Yeah. Like folks used to use Hadoop, et cetera, and then even slowly moved over to Spark, and now Spark has kind of become that de facto distributed data processing platform.
Right.
Pandas is a Python-based library that allows you to basically do data processing, data analysis, statistics, et cetera. There's libraries you can add on top of it, but allows you to do a lot of data slicing and dicing and processing and things like that. A lot of folks get their first exposure to it if they're using Jupyter notebooks. They get some data set, get data from somewhere. They're analyzing, exploring it, and then visualizing it on there. They're using Pandas to do a lot of that work. So Pandas has a notion of a data frame. It's kind of like one of their core primitive units that you use to define rows and columns and process data and run operations against, like filter, map, collect, contains, et cetera, stuff like that. So a lot of data scientists, data analysts, et cetera, are used to using Pandas to do their data exploration. Eventually, they want to get their logic right, and they're like, okay, that's great for the little POC we did, and we proved out an algorithm or something, but now we want to take this and move it into Spark because it can run on large data sets on a production cluster. What this does is you can use Pandas. It used to be called the Koalas library that was eventually merged into Spark as a Spark 3 something is mentioned in here. I don't remember the exact version, but you can basically use Pandas data frames and convert back and forth between Spark data frames and Panda data frames and use a subset of the Pandas API directly in Spark now. So folks that are just used to using Pandas can take what they built and move it over more easily than before into Spark and then run it across a cluster on a large data set. Now, this is not in use because this is from last year around November, but
still good information. Yeah,
still, I think it's really interesting. Actually, Keith Gregory shared the article with me yesterday because we were talking about a potential opportunity where they built something in Pandas, they want to move it over to Spark, and maybe they'll be able to reuse a lot of what they did, hopefully.
Wow, this is really, really cool. All right, good to know. Good to know. All right. Well, by the way, for all these things, if you go to our website, when you look at our blog entries and such, like for example, if you go to the blog here, to the podcast, just briefly, if I grab last podcast, we have show notes for everything on here. So all the links are there. It'll also be on the YouTube channel in the chat once it goes live and gets published. And you can also view the video from our website. So if you're on our website, you can go to resources podcast, pick the current podcast, will be 47. And you can go and grab the links for things we're talking about here. So cool. All right. I threw my own in here just for fun because I do love talking about pain because it helps the pain subside. But I wanted to point out something kind of weird. JavaScript has a module system, and I know there was a Node version of the module system for loading extra files at runtime. And then there was a browser importing system. So the ECMAScript JavaScript modules import syntax, which is import and export, is now what most people use when they're building things like React and Angular and Vue applications. So they'll use import something from something else. And also exporting things by name or what have you. So what I did was I found out after hours and hours of debugging a problem that I thought something was the default export of a library, which means the one that doesn't have to have a name, when it turns out something else was the default. And the error message I was getting from Next.js, which is a React build framework for the server, was telling me something that I thought was one place, but the stack trace wasn't useful enough to figure out what the problem was. So I outlined that in here, but it comes down to most React developers export components, this is a component, as the default export of a file. So the syntax for exporting default is export default something, whether it's a string, a number, an object, a function. And so a function is a React component. It renders the React content. When you import the default, you don't put it in curly braces. You just give it a name. And I knew this before when I used to teach this stuff a lot. This name could be cheeseburger over here. So first of all, we don't care what you name it when you're importing it because it's the default. It's kind of unfair because you really should be using the same name as is in the file. So I'm hoping that there's a good ESLint rule on this, and I can't remember off the top of my head if that's turned on by default, but this is totally legitimate. So first way you can mess yourself up is by picking the wrong name and then getting confused about what's being used. But this would still technically work. So that throws you a bit when you're using imports in JavaScript. But, and I have a little complaint there. We'll skip that. Another one. So what I was doing was I had a component, and this component was being exported and used. Let's see here. And it was using something called use SWR. All right. SWR, whoops, sorry. Wait a minute. Yeah. SWR is a hook which does networking. So here's the bottom line. The bottom line was, come here, you. I was using it as the non-default import. So I was using import of SWR config because that's a component. Because I thought most libraries use their default exports as components. So this SWR config component is supposed to like wrap your stuff, okay? It's supposed to wrap your information so you can have default settings. It's a component. But it turns out that's not the default export of this library. The default export from the library was the hook itself, not a component. So I know this is like probably not going off the way I thought it would when I was explaining it before. And I do see a typo in my blog post, which I almost always do when I explain these things. So I'm going to go hide, but minor. But the point being that don't always assume that the default export from a React library is a component, even though that's probably what you will do as a developer. Because when you're building an application in React and you're putting all these files together and saying, I'm building a component, your default mode is generally, as most React developers, is to create a default export as the component. This library used a completely non-component export as the default. And the way the error message came out pointed to the wrong file from what I thought it was. So I was looking in one place for a long time trying to figure this out, and everything looked like it worked properly. But it was the outer wrapper tool in here that I needed to use this import use SWR as the default import, and then use a named import with curly braces for this one. I'm going to clean up this blog post too. I realize there's like 2 typos that are making this hard to explain, but bottom line is this should be curly braced. And in most React development environments, most React developers, your default import is generally a component. That's all I have to say. So sorry, a little bit cryptic, but hey, yet another bomb. Okay, let's talk about the Apple event, because I think there's a couple things I want to kind of marinate on around the Apple event. So the first thing is Tom's guide has a nice overview of all the things that were released. They released a fair amount of hardware. So one of the things is they released the new iPhone SE, so a lower priced iPhone that they put the A15 chip in, which is great. So it's going to be better battery life and cheap relatively compared to other iPhones. So it's a nice upgrade for the smaller form factor iPhone SE. They released the iPad Air 5 with an M1 chip. So that's also going to be really interesting to see. It's like they claim it's twice as fast as the laptop in the same range. Well, you buy a laptop for $500, it's not going to be a screamer, but if it's twice as fast as that, it seems like it'd be pretty productive. But it's a tablet, so how productive can it really be, right? It's great for games and great for taking notes and stuff, but I'm not going to run my whole app development on it. That said, it's got an M1 chip. So hopefully we're going to see more sophisticated things taking advantage of that chip, even in these iPad Airs. There is also a brand new Mac Studio. Think of it as like a double cheeseburger version of the Mac Mini. It's like double the height or triple the height of the Mac Mini, with some impressive speeds and impressive hardware in them. So anyway, that's all listed in here. They have like prices. Tom's Hardware is a great guide to go to look at some of this stuff. There's a new studio display that isn't $6,000. It's $1,599. Still a lot of money to spend. And they axed the 27-inch Mac. But one of the things, and I know you want to talk about this, is they also, alongside of this, released Mac OS 12.3 and the latest version of iOS, which I think is whatever. I'll get the version of that while you're talking. Go ahead.
Yeah, so Mac OS 12.3 was just announced and released, which arrives with an interesting feature. So iPad OS 15.4 is also rolled out. And now they both support a feature called Universal Control, which is still in beta, but allows you to control a Mac and an iPad at the same time with a single keyboard and a mouse or trackpad. So you can enter text on either device, drag files between them. I haven't played around this, so I can't talk about it with any detail about how it works in practice and how seamless it is. But with where everyone being remote these days or moving around, where we're working on the office and not having all the equipment that they want, if they have an iPad sitting around, they have their machine, basically getting another display may not be the most ideal setup, but now you have a secondary display that you can easily just not have to like connect with hardware anywhere. It's probably just wireless. And then having this in place is really nice. And would have been nice right now, actually, for this podcast, where the pages that we're talking about, the news items on the iPad or something, right? Or have Slack or something on the iPad. Oh, look at that.
This is me. God, it knows when I'm browsing because I'm doing it backwards. I'm using my mouse for my computer. So what I did was I enabled this, and it's just a setting in settings somewhere. I forget already where. But I put put the iPad Mini on the left side of my Mac just now, and I dragged the mouse, and it took a little lag of like a quarter second, then all of a sudden it became a circle, just like it would if you connect the mouse to an iPad, and you have full control over it. So it was really seamless and easy to activate, and I think that's great. I've used that other feature they have, which is what do they call it? Where is it on here? Anyway, it's the remote access feature that you have now, where you can treat the iPad as a second screen for a Mac, but it's one way, and it's very limited. You don't really have like much control over it beyond like using it as a separate screen, and you're still moving things around in it. But this is actually literally, like you said, drag and drop. It's a really cool feature.
Yeah, I mean, I could totally use it for this. I could use it for meetings where if I'm moving from one room to another, it's much easier to carry an iPad around than a monitor. So you get a lightweight, untethered second display for cheap, basically, if you already have an iPad that supports, iPad OS 15.4. Right. So I'm definitely eager to try this out, see how well it works. I'm pretty sure I'm going to take advantage of it. They mentioned a few other things like spatial audio, which has Apple Music now has dynamic head tracking support for compatible AirPods, of course, for AirPods.
Get the money out. But that means that, like, I suppose if they had like a surround sound mix, this whole spatial audio mix thing, as you turn around, you hear the sound differently. That's wild that you get that.
Yeah.
So, and good news, you get more emoji.
Yeah. I don't know how that. Do you know how that works in terms of like what kind of recording technology is going into that? I guess how they have set up. So like, are they using that for like, let's say I want to hear a symphony or orchestra. Are they being recorded in a way that I can get that spatial audio?
They're starting to be. From what I understand, there are tracks that are coming out, like albums are coming out with spatial audio support.
Okay.
So I would think that it's not something you're going to get for the entire catalog. Maybe there's like a simulated surround.
Okay.
You know how sometimes you get like the sound expander APIs and stuff like that and make things sound wider than they are. But this is literally, you turn your head to the left for a movie or whatever, and you're seeing and hearing things more. That's got to be crazy.
Yeah.
So I'm really interested in trying it out. I know if I want to try it out, I'm going to have to like, I just bought a guitar. I can't buy another pair of AirPods. guns. I'm gonna get killed at home. Yeah, this looks really interesting. So, and there's a new Siri. There's a less gendered voice option for Siri, filters for the podcast app, all sorts of stuff like that. So that's pretty cool. And of course, more accurate battery capacity readings. Moving on. I also found this while we were talking about that. This is someone's blog opinion. Jean-Louis Gassi, I think is his name. Jean-Louis Gassi. And he was just kind of like doing some reviews of the M1 Ultra chip and reading up on it. He points out in a non-tech article, so I will put that in the show notes as well. Here's what they did. The M1 Ultra is the new chip that they have for the Apple workstation they have coming up, the Apple Studio. Turns out that the M1 Max has always had a channel integration, like a bus, for hooking up with another M1 Max. It's been in the design since the beginning. That's what they did. They basically bonded two M1 Maxes together on a die. So now you've got shared memory, shared, bus speed and all sorts of stuff like power consumption, all in one dual chip. What's crazy about this is the specs they had listed. First of all, a 64-core GPU, which I'm assuming is getting close to like desktop GPU category or maybe faster, who knows? So each GPU in the 64 GPUs is a separate device to the system, and the software vendors have to figure out innovative ways to connect them together. So I would assume it's going to take a little while for the software to catch up, but I'm assuming things like Adobe are going to figure that out relatively soon with things like Premiere and rendering. So there's that. It's also where is it on here? Here we go. 20-core CPU, 64-core GPU, and 32-core neural engine. The thing's crazy. And I think it's something like $1,900 or something like that. So it's not cheap, but if you want workstation performance, they got a machine for you. You'd have to set it up with a nice monitor and keyboard and such, but it's like a good, powerful replacement for a desktop developer who isn't taking theirs on the road. It's basically like double the power of the latest 16-inch Mac in a form factor that can deal with the heat dissipation. That's what
Does it say what this has done to battery life?
Well, I know, because this isn't a laptop. This is a desktop they put it in. My assumption is that it would burn a battery right out.
I didn't even hear that part. Okay.
Yeah, no, that's okay. And then that's because they released this as part of not the Studio Display. Come back now. The Mac Studio. Of course, it starts at $19.99. I am assuming, there we go. It costs $4,000 for an M1 Ultra. So before you get all excited, it's like buying two desktops.
Yeah.
Well, it is like because you got two desktops.
It actually is like buying two desktops. So the 64-core GPU, I'm wondering. I mean, they should be able to do a lot of machine learning.
Well, there's 32 machine learning cores.
Neural engine, yeah. That's a separate neural engine. I don't quite know what that's for. I'm thinking more like general purpose machine learning.
Yeah. But like the CPU-based stuff, right? So like, hey, you got the GPUs, you got 64 of those at the maximum. You've got the 20 cores of CPU. You've got the neural engines. The thing's going to start talking to you and saying, Dave, I don't want you to go out and check out the spaceship, Dave. It's going to start telling you how to live. Anyway, if you got $4,000. And I don't have
crypto mining. Maybe be able to do crypto mining on the 64 core GPU.
It could be. Oh, did you hear about that? Side note: there is a fake NVIDIA driver laying around out there. What happens is NVIDIA, I believe it was, and Miles, my son, can tell me in chat that I'm full of it. What time is it? Oh, you have 2 minutes. Is that they throttle it so you can't do crypto mining, but there's a fake video driver out there that has a ton of spyware in it that lets you unlock the video. You install it, you get hacked. So anyway, all right. I know you have to have a hard out here at 2 minutes from now, so I can take on the rest of these myself if you want to. I'm just going to bring up a couple of things. In our helpful sites section, we have catalog of design patterns. Which, remember design patterns before we all got functional? This is a nice website that like kind of makes them very clear, nice pictures for someone just getting into this kind of thing.
Nice.
Did they use Hey Bro? Yeah, they did Hey Bro. I'm going to have to tell them to stop doing that. But anyway, there's lots of code samples in here as well. So it looks like a neat site if you're looking at like classical object-oriented design and you're looking for, documentation on patterns.
Was that using types? Wait, what language is that? TypeScript?
I don't know. I thought that one, I don't know. Class.
No, it's wait.
Is that dot? I don't know. Swift? No, it's not Swift, is it?
Or is it some sort of pseudocode? It doesn't look like pseudocode.
I don't know. Good question.
Interesting. Okay.
Interesting, yeah. Next one is a
yeah.
Next one's a Vim reference guide that I thought was nice, and I still use Vim. I'm curious from you as a reader, or listener, or viewer, if you still use Vim or Emacs. Different people at Chariot have different opinions on editors. We all do. Everyone does in software. I still find it keeps my keys on the keyboard, my hands on the keyboard more. And so I like using Vim. Here's a nice Vim reference guide for people looking into getting into Vim. So it's kind of nice, put together in one place. This we will wait for next week. It's too much of a discussion for, so let's skip the rest of these for now. We'll cover the rest of these next week. But that about does it. So again, register for ETE. It's coming up in April 19th and 20th, and the early bird is still until March 31st, $150. Don't forget to do that. And if you're interested in what Chariot does and potentially working for Chariot, hey, we're hiring. So you can take a look at our jobs at chariotsolutions.com/careers. So John, you have 2 seconds to say what we're looking for right now.
Sure. We're looking for back-end folks, Java, Python, Node, Clojure, Golang. We're looking for front-end, React, Angular. We're looking for mobile, iOS and Android. We're looking for senior data engineers that have a lot of experience on building and architecting data pipelines on the cloud, AWS, Azure, Google Cloud Compute. So, we're aggressively hiring. We're interested in talking to you. Take a look. Reach out to us. There's a lot of stuff on our website about the kind of projects we work on. Yeah, any questions, we're more than happy to chat with folks and tell them more about Chariot, find out where they are in their career, what they want to be doing. Even if you're not on the fence, you're not sure whether you want to do consulting or you're not sure whether you want to, make a move, but you just want to find out more. I still think it's worth having that conversation. So please feel free to reach out. The way Ken and I are here are the way we are in real life. So
completely,
this is who we are.
All right, great. Thank you so much, Sujan, and everyone. Have a good 2 weeks. We'll see you in a couple of weeks.
Take care. Thanks, Ken.